Hi everybody. Well, it's been quite a while since the last time we checked in with our lace monitors, and since then, as you can see by the intro to the video, our single male has now become two. We've since inherited a female lacey. Unfortunately, she's not out at the moment. She's tucked away in her box, probably because she gets annoyed by big Cagney over there. But the reason the video has sort of taken a while to put together is, and firstly, apologies for any background noise. As I think I've explained before, we live fairly close to our main road, so the traffic is unavoidable. The reason it has taken a while to put out a next instalment or update on our laces is, well, it's really been a period of settling in for a female. Now, the story around our female, who we loosely call Lacey these days, first and foremost, the girl that has come to us is about 17 years old. She was effectively bequeathed to us by a really good friend of mine I've known for a long time, who life for my friend had just changed a bit, and she just thought it would do the best thing for her animal to send it to a new home. So after some toing and froing over a period of time, we sort of thought, and I'm just going to watch myself here because, and I'm going to move away because whilst old mate here is, I won't say really no threat. He's not a tame animal. He hasn't been raised to be tame. So he's sort of over here checking me out because I'm in his domain, and really he's probably just thinking that he's going to get fed. So back to the girl. So as I was saying, she was bequeathed to us by a good friend. The most important thing for us, while it's a female and the opportunity to introduce a female to Cagney, it was somewhat exciting. It was really more important to make sure that we were going to give a good home to this female, and that Cagney would tolerate and accept this girl coming into his enclosure. You can see by some of the footage at the start of the video and some of the footage that I'll insert that the initial introductions, whilst really quite nerve-wracking because of the size difference or disparity, the introductions were actually quite positive. In fact, many months ago when we did the introductions for the first time, the response, the male-female response from Cagney in particular, was immediate. You can see by, again, some of the footage that he went straight into, typical behaviour of a male in the presence of a female, which was positive in the sense that it wasn't aggression. So he was not going to do her any harm. That was the relief to start with. So it's been several months now since these introductions have happened, and we've still fine-tuning things and adjusting things, be it the hide box, the opportunity for the female, because she is so much smaller, to hide in different areas that he can't get to. Because the reality is, he is very persistent and has been very persistent in the presence of her. So. And it's never aggression, but he seems to be quite constant in his pursuit of her. Talk about it later, but we believe there has been some mating. I'll move around a little bit. We'll try and get the boy into shot here. And I'll duck down in here so we can hopefully see Cagney in the background here. And if we're lucky, the girl might actually come out while we're in here. But now that it's warm, she can be quite content and hide away in private without the big boy. And their hide box, whilst he accesses the hide box at night and they both share the hide box, he doesn't seem to have the movement and the dexterity in smaller space to be able to give her too much grief. Well, that's the thinking anyway. And his preference is usually to stay outside and move around. He's a typical lace monitor. He's always on the hunt for food. So you can see even now, he's quite alert, and if I was to offer him any food, he would certainly jump at the opportunity. So the great thing that we've been able to achieve with the introduction of the two animals is the fact that there's been no aggression that I've actually seen at any stage. Now, a bit of a disclaimer. During winter, I did remove the girl from this enclosure, and we gave her an overwintering enclosure, if you like, for two reasons. One, she's, as I said, she's in it well over 15 years old. So she'd been in her own enclosure for that period of time, all her life pretty much, and she'd been well looked after, but again, lived in her own enclosure. So it was a great shock to bring her into a new enclosure. A new enclosure that was completely foreign, all the smells were foreign, excuse me, and it had another occupant. And just, he wants to come this way, but he also wants to, I'm going to give him his space, because this is his enclosure. I don't want him to feel threatened by me and then suddenly maybe get spooked and lash out. So I'll try and give him his space. And he's going to keep coming over here. So I'll move around. I am going to try and keep well out of the reach of his tail, as he will, if I was to touch his tail, or if he feels threatened anyway, he will definitely whip me with that tail. And his tail is huge and it would hurt. So anyway, so we moved the girl in and then gave her the overwintering enclosure, as I said, to get her maybe away from this guy for a period of, well, you know, a period which is seasonally stressful for them as well. And he wants to come over and keep saying hello. But if you stay there and I stay here, we'll be right. Now you're going to come over here. Now I'll just stand up. I'm kind of okay with him being at my feet. I've got some good footwear on, so I don't think he can do too much damage if he decides to have a taste. As I was saying with the girl, whilst we've had her now for quite some time, during winter, I did move her out. As I said before, we moved her into what you'd call an overwintering cage. Whilst there is some, albeit a small amount, there is some artificial heating in their hide box, and the girl had lived outside all her life, so it wouldn't have been a problem actually enduring a Melbourne winter. But I just wanted to not increase any stress levels by leaving her in here and have to sort of find her own space, compete with a male, a very overzealous male, in a foreign environment, which I thought, you know, probably added an element of risk to her health. So what we did is we moved her inside over winter. I kept her in a cage that had some heating, lighting, as you'd expect, a big enough cage to keep a lace monitor of her size for a few months. And during that period of time, we were also able to feed her and get some condition on her. So we roll forward a few months, and the seasons have changed, and now we're actually been able to put her outside again, which effectively started the clock again. So with that kind of reboot with the introduction, there was still that sort of, I guess, concern that it might go south a little bit, but thankfully it didn't. She was a little stressed out to start with, but the transition from being inside back into this outdoor enclosure was much smoother and quicker than the first time we'd introduced the two earlier in the year. And she's really come a long way now in all respects, particularly her eating. She'd become very selective and fussy, and she's still quite selective with what she eats and the way she eats and when she eats. But she's what I'd call almost typical of a Lacey now with the aggression towards food. She loves her food, but she's always cautious of the presence of the male because he is so much bigger. We've since seen a bit of activity that I suspect is to do with some mating. Whilst we haven't seen any mating as such, there was a period of maybe about a month or so ago where our female had a wound, a bit of a laceration on her tail, behind her cloaca, which was, when we first saw it, was a little bit of a concern. But we got her out, we treated the wound, had a really close inspection, and it seemed quite superficial, and the location of the wound pointed to everything towards mating activity. Now, whether the mating activity was successful is neither here nor there. It's probably not important. The fact is, she is okay. Apologies for the motorbike. They do get very loud. She is okay. There's certainly no detrimental effects from it. But on a positive note, that and having spoken to some friends as well that have had a lot of experience with monitors, it's not an unheard of thing for the females to sustain some wounds, and sometimes what they might look pretty significant, but these things are pretty tough, as we know. So she's fine. That's as a result of him being much bigger. His claws are huge, and when they drag the female in to position themselves, if you like, now she doesn't get much choice in it, I would say, that's when those sort of injuries can occur. So all in all, at the moment, as an update, things are going quite well. Old mate over here seems very happy that he's got the potential for a relationship. And our female is doing really, really well. She's really adapting quite well to life in this enclosure. She has her own space. She's worked out ways she can actually get away from the male, as an example. Got a hollow log here that I essentially put an end cap on that only she can fit into. So that log is probably around 5 or 6 foot long, and she can get down in there and away from the male. I've also got another hide with an entry that only she can fit in, and our basking log here, he is really not nimble enough and is too big to actually get to the top. So she quite commonly sits right up here to bask. It's a great basking platform, but I've no doubt she's worked out that she can get away from Cagney. Now, you can see here, he is going in to the hide box because that's where she is. So he will go in there, he will try his luck. She probably won't have a bar of him, and he'll eventually give up and come back out again. And that seems to be the norm. So we're still tweaking things and working with things to find a situation that sort of suits her as well, and it may mean we have to, you can see he's coming out again here. Unsuccessful, I'd say. We may have to actually change the hide box just to allow, again, her some space that she can get into on her own. So I'm thinking about extending the hide box, which is external. And you can see, I think I've shown it before, it's simply just a hole in the enclosure wall that goes to an external box. Thinking about extending that box with a second section with a smaller entry that, again, she can only get into. So it's a real good learning curve having the second monitor, and a second monitor that is of age, in fact older than him, but is much smaller, opposite sex. So all these behaviours from both of them are really quite new, and it's, you know, again, a great learning curve for us. The great thing with Cagney, our old boy, who's around that 13 or 14 year mark now, he has really never been with a female apart from when he was very, very young. We had a second monitor that now lives somewhere else, but essentially he's not known to have another, I guess, another lace monitor or another animal that he has to share his existence with. Interestingly enough, putting a male and female together of this age is certainly no guarantee that we're ever going to see any successful mating or anything like that. It's possible that they're too old, they're too past it, and not too old to breed, definitely not too old to breed. He wouldn't be a problem, but a female that's never seen any breeding is possibly detrimental to their reproductive system. There's some really interesting information out there, particularly around Komodo dragons and their reproductive system, particularly in captivity. If I can find the link to a particular podcast, I'll put it in the comments below, because it's a really interesting listen. And Varanus varius lace monitors are probably the closest varanid to Komodo dragons that there are. So it's probably fair to draw some parallels with reproduction and stuff like that. So it's very interesting information out there about animals actually not breeding is not necessarily that good for their health, and it's not necessarily good for longevity, and in fact could probably potentially be detrimental to their reproductive system and maybe even their lifespan. That's obviously, hopefully, a long time before we worry about that. So we certainly hope that these two become friendly enough that they reproduce. That's the ultimate game, but for now, our two, I won't call them lovebirds, but our two lovebirds are coexisting okay, healthy, feeding well, and living a pretty good existence, I would say. So not much has changed for Cagney over here. He's just now got a girl in his presence. Other than that, he's still the same old guy that he's always been. And I won't stick this camera too much in his face because you'll see that as a threat. So I'm about 1/2 metre away from him. The other interesting, I guess, observation that we've made is he is very persistent with the girl in many respects. And from the outside, it often seems like it's quite a violent existence because they often bang on the tin. But what we've noticed is he often pursues her, and he looks quite awkward when he does it. He very much looks like he doesn't quite know what to do in the presence of a girl. So she's a lot quicker, she's a lot more nimble, which is good because she can outrun him, and she does that quite often. He's interested in me and why I'm here. But again, this is his environment, so I'm going to back off because this is his domain, as I said. So I'll always give him his space. So it is interesting that he does pursue her quite a lot around the cage, but she is much more nimble, as I said, than he, so she can outrun him. So they, if nothing else, one thing they do is they get a lot of exercise, because usually most days, particularly on warm days, and you can see now, he's just really content now to bask. He's just having a bit of a bask to probably just recalibrate his body temperature. So they get a bit of, and every time I move my hands, he responds. So I've got to try to remember to stop moving my fingers around in my hands because he usually thinks that's food. So interestingly enough, I think that there's probably the one benefit of them being together and being so active is they are exercising a lot. So they're using their limbs a lot, they're sort of jogging around, they are climbing. He certainly gets a lot more exercise than he probably ever used to. And look, I think that's quite a good thing. It might be a fine line between exercising and creating a stressful situation, but slowly but surely I think that our girl is really starting to adapt to it and finding her own niche in this enclosure. So I'm more and more confident as each sort of week and month goes by that the two of them will be able to exist together for a long time to come. And I think what I'll do is we'll just sort of leave it for now. I might put in some stills of her just to give you a bit of a look because she hasn't come out this whole time we've been here. Don't blame her. But yeah, I'll update again at another stage, particularly if a situation changes and we see some change as far as matings or anything like that occur. But right now, they seem to be quite content in their existence and enjoying the southern Australian spring as it gets warmer and warmer and warmer. All right, so with that, I'll leave you with Cagney and we'll talk next time. Thanks. Amazingly enough, just as I was shutting down the camera, I looked around and I didn't even see her appear, but guess who appeared? Our little Lacey. Our beautiful little girl. Not too far in her shadow is Cagney here. And the temperature is such, even though it's not a hot day here in Melbourne, it's only in the low 20s, of course Celsius. It's certainly warm enough for lace monitors. In this enclosure, being a dark animal, they heat up really, really well in this enclosure. But you can see she's much smaller. She's got a few old scars, but otherwise than that, they are just scars. It's all superficial, but she's a beautiful little animal. Really, really, really finding her quite interesting, even though I've seen lace monitors, had lace monitors, and seen many of them in the wild. It's interesting to see how different they actually can be individually. And she's got her own personality. And interestingly enough, she is she's quite flighty compared to Cagney here, but she is more than happy when you feed to sort of come and get some food from you on her terms. She's a little bit nervous, but I think it's more in the presence of the male. Other than that, and I think you'll find she's about to probably take off, because he will sniff her and she's going to want to take off. And you can see that. She's going to go right around me, around here. So I'm going to get out of their way. And we'll see what sort of behaviour we can capture here. We'll just sort of keep this rolling for another minute and just see what happens here. So you can see that she wanted to come out just to get warm again. And she's going to come past me a bit warily, so I'll give her some space, because she might want to just duck down into her box here. No, she's got onto a smell that she likes. I don't think there's any food down there though. But I think she's also fast learning that she can keep her distance from him. She's worked out that she can get away from him, and it allows her to behave a bit more naturally and normally. So she's not prohibited from basking, from eating. So she's doing quite well. And interestingly enough, I thought one of the challenges we would have, and apologies if the video is going just a little bit long, but as she's come out, I thought it's a really good way to update things. Interestingly enough, I thought one of the challenges we would have would be feeding, and he would get the lion's share. She's just down here. I'm not even sure if you can see her on the camera, I'm sorry. No, she's on this side. One of my concerns, as I mentioned, was food, whether he would get the lion's share. And I'm just watching her, and even me being here is probably not a bad thing, hopefully learning that I'm not really a threat. Okay, so food, as I said, rather than just sort of toss food in now, he's so easy to feed, he just will come flying at food, where she's a lot more cautious. I'm actually able to get in here and feed them individually. I thought I was going to have a big problem the moment I offered the girl food, that he would come out of nowhere. But he's just, when I offer food to him, he does what he always does, but even though he seems to know I've got food, and he doesn't come charge at me. So I've been able to feed the girl quite well, even in his presence, without too many issues. Saying that, I think if I was to just randomly put food in, he would get 95% of it, maybe 100, and she would get the leftovers if lucky. So that's probably the highest management thing at the moment, is the feeding. It's not a problem for us. It's quite enjoyable being able to get in and interact with them, but feeding is the one thing at the moment. It presents the biggest challenge, and again, it's not the hugest problem. So there you go. We've had a bit of a look. She managed to come out and not snob us completely. So I won't disturb her too much. She's just come out for an afternoon bask. She's got one eye on me, the camera, and of course one eye on Cagney over there. You can probably see in the background. And yeah, we'll leave it there for now. As I said, like and subscribe, and yeah, we'll look forward to sort of putting some more content together as time goes by. Thanks. Talk to you soon.